All right, we're live, Tuesday Night Live, Eastern Outdoors Media, talking some white bass here in Kentucky. We'll give some people some time to log in here. Got a crew of 4 tonight. Mike, I feel like you've not been with us in a while. Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
missed the last two, I think.
Yeah, well, you've been recovering. You've been
Yeah,
recovering since the Cats loss.
yeah. It's
But
it's. I told somebody today. It's for me. It's true grievance. It takes me a
yeah,
long time to get over.
listen, for 99% of the people, when they say that, I'm like, all right, well, it really is for you.
It is.
It really is like mourning for you.
You know, I
I'm
can
gonna.
only imagine. I bet the Falcons fans that got beat by the Patriots in the Super Bowl are still mourning.
Probably. Joshua
Yeah.
Massingill, are you a Wildcats or Cardinals fan?
I can tell you, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that one of the best things that happened to Kentucky, I think, was the Wildcats losing,
Huh.
because it allowed people to focus right about the time they needed to be on some white bass.
There you go. There you go.
We can focus on the real March Madness now.
There we go.
It is madness. If you've never been to Palmer Road in the months of March and April, like you're missing out.
You could literally make a small fortune with a hot dog stand. That's
Yes.
the traffic you're talking about.
Yes, you could. That is true. All right, we got a lot of people already on here. Let's see, a lot of regulars. Hopefully, some people that's never joined us before. Jimmy Carroll is on here. Eddie, do you catch any white bass, or is just it's just the largemouth, the greenfish for you? Let's see. Josh, what's your brand of chaw? First question of the night. What's your brand of chaw?
I'll
Well,
take. Oh, I was going to say, okay, the guy on the
Either
right.
of you, yeah. There you go. They don't matter.
go ahead, Josh.
No, I was going to jump in. I prefer to be a long leaf style personally.
Okay, that's Mike too. I don't
Yep.
have a chaw.
I'm a dipper. I usually dip Longhorn, and I know most people are probably not good, but I've been dipping it for a long time. It's cheap, but right now I'm dipping Grizzly. So
Oh, is that a step up?
little every once in a while I get in the mood for it. Stop by the gas station and get it, but most of the time it's Longhorn.
Yeah. Hey, I've told this story before, Josh. That I used to chew longleaf anytime I was either fishing or in the woods. That'd be the only time I chewed. I didn't really chew any other time, whether I was, home or anything. I was just mainly outdoor stuff. I've since kind of given it up, but I was a big Red Man, Levi Garrett type guy. Definitely kind of enjoyed one anytime I was outdoors.
We need to get you back on your vices, Mike. You need a good vice. All right, hold on. We got another. Speaking of vices, we have another question about bourbon. So, we'll go Massengale Jenkins. Massengale, we've talked about this before. What's your favorite bourbon?
Hands down, it'd have to be Blanton's. If you
Bland.
pick something that's hard to get, but that you can get, it would be Blanton's.
All right, there you go. We have a lot of fans. Some not so much fans. But last time we talked about this, there were all kinds of different answers, as you can imagine. As long as it's distilled in Kentucky, that's like the first requirement, I think. I don't know.
It is.
Yeah. So, hey, real quick, Josh Wilson said we got a lot of Joshes. Josh Wilson said, "Love the Keeping Bass article today." So today we posted an article on why we should eat more bass. Jason Kenner, good buddy of mine, incredible bass tournament angler. He's done extensive research, talked to biologists from Kentucky, Tennessee, from Major League Fishing, from Bassmaster, all around, and they've all concluded that we should be keeping bass that are, 12 to 16 inches according to your krill, your size and krill limits. And it's got a lot of good response. A lot of good response on that. Also, something that's gotten like no response except for Jimmy Carroll on here is the giveaway. So we've partnered with a company, it's American Outdoor Brands, but they own Old Timer Knives. They own Huey Man, which is a new line of like outdoor tools. And so in my garage right now, I have axes and rakes and saws that we're going to be using for them. And then they also own the processing company called Meat. So if you process your own deer, your own fish, whatever, meat. And so we partnered with those 3 brands. Anyway, we're giving away an electric, it's a lithium ion rechargeable electric fillet knife. It's $100 value. After the live or during the live or whenever, go and find that post on our page and just sign up for it. Even if you don't want it, if you got 5 of them, I just need you to sign up for it. We need a good showing for that. So next time, maybe they'll give away, they have like a $350 lithium ion 10-foot pole saw that I want. And so maybe we can give one of those away next time. That's very handy around the house. So anyway, we're here to talk white bass. I just need to plug those real quick. We got 75 people watching. We've got people already today messaging us. Hey, I went and tried to catch some the other day, and this was the water temp, and this was that, and this was that. So Joshua Massingill, let me take that comment off here. Joshua Massingill, one of the first people we talked to when we started this.
Yep.
April makes 2 years since we started. And he was one of the first ones because White Bass Run is a huge deal. And he educated me. I mean, we talked on the phone. I wrote a story on it. And he just gave me a master's course in, not just white bass. He's a striped bass guy. And so, Josh, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. Just where has this passion and this love for striped bass fishing, chasing them all over the place, come from?
It's really weird how you find the things that you appreciate. And I think for most folks, it's a journey, it's a path. And sometimes you don't even realize how you get there. Obviously, I've always enjoyed fishing. I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I think I started fishing the Ohio River about 12 years back and fell in love with the river, fell in love with sauger, fell in love with drum, all the things you shouldn't fall in love with. I didn't have a mentor. So you fall in love with what's easy and it's readily available, and you go up from there. So that led into if you fish the river enough, you'll get into hybrids. And fortunately, when I started fishing the river, there was a lot less rain. And I think, rain and patterns, if you look at it over time, that absolutely impacts the white bass and what we see versus if you look back a few decades, what we've really seen the last 6 years plus. But even going back, that 10, 11, 12 years, we had a lot of low water years. And I've kayak fished for probably almost 17 years, 17, 18 years.
Wow. You were in early. Yeah.
Before it was popular.
We were in very early. I was out kayaking in Ohio for years before I ever saw a second kayaker out there, which was pretty cool. But we had an opportunity to get out there on low water years and get out there early enough that got to experience both hybrids from a kayak, very easily accessible, because water flow was down in the spring, and then subsequently ran into a lot of white bass, a lot of mega white bass in April, and did that a couple years in a row. And you have no choice but to fall in love with it. And so just through the course of several years and all the different fish you catch down there, I fell in love with the stripes. Some people go the catfish route. Some people go the sauger. You pick and choose. But from there, it became a passion. And just year over year over year, just trying to learn more, absorb more, and just really hone the craft. So you get the Ohio River, and then you've got to step off that and try to figure out something else, and then figure out another piece of the puzzle, and then figure out another piece. So that's really where it all began. And the journey every single year morphs and tries to get better. So
I'm curious for the people watching who has actually tried to go out in the spring and chase the white bass. It comes up if you get on Facebook this time of year and hit any of the Kentucky fishing groups, it's like every other post. When's the white bass run? When's the white bass run? Anybody catching white bass? Like it literally is. I'm sure, some guys are so tired of hearing it already. But I just want to let us know in the comments if you have experienced this white bass craze and if you're just here to learn about it. So Ohio River, you're big Falls of the Ohio guy too, right? Uh-oh. See, he already got tired of it. I told you. All right. Let's see. Chuck Maynard says he'll be back, I'm sure. Chuck Maynard says he fishes the Dix and Salt every year. Best of luck at Salt for me. Salt River is the premier destination in the state. I jokingly say it's like covered up with people, but it really is. Like if you go on a Wednesday, you're going to be okay. You go on a Saturday morning at the Peak Run on Palmer Road, Salt River. There's not a parking spot. They just expanded the parking lot, actually.
Huh.
It's near Taylor. You know, Salt River goes into Taylorsville. There's not a parking spot. It's shoulder to shoulder, right? And the best luck I've had is actually on the Dix River too. Funny story. I went on the Dix River to catch white bass. I went with a buddy of mine, and you don't have any service there where we were. And his wife was about to call the state police on us because she thought we were missing. We only been gone like 2 hours. So
I think I remember that.
It was funny. Yeah, we laughed about it.
I think I've never really been white bass fishing like intentionally, but we was up on Kentucky Lake. It was me and my wife, and the only like run-in I've ever had with them. She had just missed a massive largemouth. I think I told the story a couple of weeks ago on a topwater bait, and I kept seeing shad bubbling everywhere. Like it literally looked like the water was, it was crazy, like just shad everywhere. And we were casting red crankbaits into it, and literally one after the other was the white bass over and over.
Yeah. We didn't know. I said that people were getting tired of hearing about it. I thought you just bowed out. You're already tired of talking about white bass.
Oh, no. I had my phone on the charger while I was doing this, and so I didn't get the warning. It said it overheated, so it had to for a second. Right. So I'm holding it now, so we're back on. We're good.
All right, so we have a lot of people saying they're here to learn to want to find out more about catching the white bass. So let's start here. Yeah. You know, we have – it seems like next week's my spring break from school, and is a 35 to 45% chance of rain every single day. And so, Josh, I know for you, though, rain is not necessarily a bad thing because you're looking at water temps. So kind of talk about conditions. What are you looking for at the peak to know, like, okay, these bass are running, they're going up into the streams?
Yeah, I think I'll take it a step back. I think it's a phased approach. At least the general rules I go off of, and it changes a little bit year over year. So for the last, I called out 6 years, we've had a lot of rain in the spring, more so than we did before the last previous 6. So a drought year is going to look a little bit different, and it's not going to follow the normal cadence. But as far as the reliability we've had, it really comes down to you've got to have some additional sunlight, but you've got to have that warmer water, and you've got to have warm rain events. That's really where things start to happen, and that's rain events over 55 degrees. So my rule of thumb is I like to see at least 3 rain events over 55 degrees to really put enough white bass into some pools that really start to make it worthwhile. Your very first rain event that's warm, unless it just comes out of the blue, it'll start to push fish up. But unless you know exactly where they're holding, you know exactly what they want, and you get the right presentation, it's really like searching for a needle in the haystack. If you really want to stack the odds, you really want to go from that third 55-degree rain event and kind of work your way forwards from there. And that's really where it starts to begin, and you really start pulling in some serious numbers of fish into the pre-staging. Not only are they starting to run upriver, but you get a whole lot in that pre-staging. So if you fast forward, if you look at most reports and most history, that peak time will always call out the back end of March into early April. And that, given the weather patterns that we've had, that generally holds true. The only thing that really causes some level of deviation is we're notorious for getting a cold front or a cold snap sometime in early April. And if we don't get it severe, everything really starts to get prime. And for whatever reason, you get a shutdown, and then you're waiting for the next warm rain event to happen. And that's generally when it goes off. So go ahead.
When you say 55 degrees, now a lot of people will say, oh, the water hits 55 today, it should be a good day. But you mean when it hits 55 and it stays at 55, right?
So for a true spawn, you really want that event. You want to be in the heart of the action and really the stampede. The creeks, we have to have the weather where the creeks are staying above 55 degrees consistently, and we need a push of rain at the same time. Once you have those two conditions met, you will get enormous amounts of fish pushing upriver as soon as that happens.
Gotcha. Now, what about when you have those conditions? Are the water level, right? I mean, it's like you said, we got a lot of rain, so levels, I guess, are up or the last 6 years. But is there a certain like golden number there that you're looking for, or you just kind of go, judge it by ear? I would say, I don't know, better way to put it.
Yeah, so I guess it all depends on what you want to fish. So you've got the pre-run, you've got the run itself, and then you've got the post-run. So if you're fishing the pre-run, obviously the rain events themselves will be enough to pull fish into the staging areas. You get enough of those warm water rain events, it'll put fish up into the creek. And then once you get those, and that's what I would say the pre. And the pre generally can last for a number of weeks. So depending on which bodies of water you're in, that's been going on for probably 2 weeks now. Okay. And we're probably getting ready to get into our 3rd week. Obviously, that one snow we got kind of shut things down for a moment. But as soon as the sun came back out, you could get back on some fish. So that's the pre-run. The run itself is really, again, the creek temperatures themselves have got to stay over that 55 mark, and you have to have a rain event, and then it's lights out. And what's challenging, everybody's like, hey, when should I go? When should I go? When should I go? Yeah. And unfortunately, like most things in life, if you wait for the ideal time, sometimes you miss the most ideal time that you're really wanting to target. So it can be challenging. I mean, the run can literally be over in one single rain event. It may last, there may be multiple runs if you can get several rain events close together, or you may get such a downpour that water flow may be up for 2 or 3 days. And that may be all the fish use. So it's, you never know if you're going to get a really, when it's hot, and typically that's early to mid-April, you never realize if you're going to get a week of hot, could be 2 weeks of hot. We've even seen it where it's just 1 or 2 days of hot, where fish have been waiting and just begging for a rain flow event. And then we finally get one, and they move in and they make really quick work of it, and they're gone. So the circumstances really dictate just how much of that prime you get a chance to experience.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to go, you need to go.
You got to go.
Yeah. So guys, we got a lot of questions. So a couple of things we're going to hit on before we get off here tonight is different types of lures to use, right? And I know Josh has his favorite. I've seen him post about those in the past. We're also going to hit on some different places that you can go. So I know Jimmy asked about going around Richmond. Someone asked about Licking River. We'll talk about different places to go around and just things to look for, really, because I think everyone lives in a place where you can drive not too far and find some white bass. So go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I know we were kind of talking about like water levels, rain, things like that. The best way, how much does current affect your fishing when you're fishing for white bass? Because we didn't already cover this, did we?
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
But I know you like skinny water.
So current wise, like for me, bass fishing on Kentucky Lake, if the current is crazy, a lot of times those fish are going to go into your bays, find some cover. But if that current hits, a specific number, that money number, you're going to go out on a ledge because they're just going to be sitting waiting for that current to bring, bait by, and they're going to eat it. Whatever. You get my gist. So how much does current play a role in how well you're going to fish, or maybe a time you want to target to go fish them?
It's a good question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think you have to appreciate just how a big white bass, at least a big adult, they're fish, they're built for incredibly tough current, and we've pulled them out of some extreme whitewater, where I think I've had whitewater bass or white bass bite topwater in class 4 whitewater, if that gives you the level of confidence and ability they have. So anything under class 4 is fairly easy for them to navigate. But again, you want that to be, they become more energized and more active in that riffle water, the warmer it gets. So typically 53 to 55 is when they really start getting energized. Now they'll run hard upstream and up current in 53 degree water, sometimes in 52, and you can even catch them in some pretty swift water. But rule of thumb, the higher up you go from 55, And the closer you get to 60 and you get into those very low 60 numbers, that is prime time for them to be in some level of current, including a pretty wicked strong current. So if the creeks are holding at 60 degrees, we get a nice warm rain event and those fish are pushing in. I'll actually fish the riffles versus the holding ponds. I want the moving water because that's typically where they're going to be. They'll either be in there or they'll be moving through it, and you can catch them both ways.
Awesome. Makes sense.
So typically, I'll move from pool fishing to current fishing as we move past 55. And the closer we get to 60, I'll spend more time in the riffle water than I will the holding slack water.
All right. And you got to go farther. Do you go farther upstream in that case?
Man, you could do a whole session on do I go farther upstream. You could write a book on do I go farther upstream. And I could tell you a ton of stories that would probably be the best way to convey. Every bit of white bass run water is different. And that's really tests your ability on where to focus and what to focus on. I'll give you a perfect example. Salt River. You've got the first riffle is probably within a 2.5 mile jaunt, worst case, a 3 mile run from really the headwaters. So those bass can cover a lot of ground. So they're at the first riffle pretty quick. And there's a pretty decent gradual elevation that the salt is beautiful in that you go from riffle to riffle to riffle to riffle. It's loaded with riffles. You have a lot of freestone. It's everything they want and more. So you get a lot of opportunity for them to get to that first riffle. So you'll have, depending on just how much rain event you'll have there, those white bass probably aren't going more than 6 or 7 miles upriver. Now, if you get an extended rain event and there's a lot of flooding, they'll go much further, right? The white bass can easily go 20 plus miles.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
But if you have minor rain events, typically they're going to stay in the areas that they like to see. So, and I'll give you case in point, out even above and beyond the WMA, if you were to fish the Salt River past the WMA and you're fishing the spawn or you're fishing post-spawn run, you're going to get into a lot of fish well above the WMA. So I'll put that into position. Nolan headwaters. Nolan is like a little mini river. It's literally Nolan River, and it's got a lot of flow. It's got a tremendous amount of natural spring water that's pushing into there. So it gets a ton of flow, even when we've had no rain for weeks on end. It's amazing how much water comes out of that water system naturally. And so you've got those white bass can easily, without even a rain event, they can push probably upwards of to 20 to 30 miles upstream. They literally just keep going, and they can keep going until they find a place that they like. And what's nice is that's a lot of ground, but there's a tremendous amount of white bass in there that they will fill up every single pool for 20, 25 miles. It's tremendous. But that's no one set of white bass water is really the same as far as where you're going to find them. You're not going to go 2 miles up and find them in every piece of water. Some of those you're going to have to go 10 miles up into the stream or the system before you find a riffle. And normally the rule of thumb is you'll work to the first riffle.
What do you mean by riffle? What's a riffle?
Where you start to get some level of surface break from rocks, pebbles, boulders. You basically start to visibly see elevation change, and that reflects in the water.
Okay.
Yeah, just
kind of. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying what he said. Go.
I was going to say, this is kind of going back. I've got a largemouth bass spawn top of mind, so. I don't know much about the white bass run. I honestly, when I hear white bass run or somebody's like, man, the striper's running, I literally in my head see like dolphins like jumping through like the water. So, when people say, the striped bass run is going on, they're going upstream. And to me, a largemouth bass, the female, they make a bed, lay their eggs, and the male is guarding those eggs to fry. So once they run upstream and they lay their beds, I assume, or lay their eggs and they get everything situated. Is it kind of the same deal? Are they stationary in that spot, guarding that bed? How does it differ, or does it at all?
Yeah, I think so. You typically, what we've seen, you've got schools of them, right? So a school can be a couple hundred fish. A school can be smaller. Generally, when you're in the spawn, you're going to have fish that are basically clouds of fish. You're going to have males, you're going to have females, and they're going to select those. They like those gravel runs. They want to have some type of, they don't want mud. They don't want boulders typically. They'll be forced with current if they don't have any other choice. They'll spawn in a rain event inside the lake, with just runoff. So they can make do with some pretty limited circumstances. But when they're in those headwaters, they're looking for those ideal. They want current, and they want some structured ground in the form of, I'll call it a freestone creek, so to speak, like a gravel. They want gravel beds. And so they get into large clumps in the current, in the gravel beds, and you'll have typical spawning grounds, almost similar like salmon, where you can go and find them year after year after year. Once you identify something as a spawning run or a spawning bed, you can reliably go there and catch them in and around there.
Okay.
And there's tons of them, right? There's not just one, there's not just two, there's not just three. They go on for miles and miles, even in small water.
Josh, along those lines, that's a really great segue. I was going to ask about apps. Do you use like mapping apps, things of that nature to, from one year to the next? Is that something that you're using to help you mark those places where you see current a little bit, depending on water levels and things of that nature, where current speeds up and it's a great spot to try? Is that something that you use often?
So I do use OnX, and I've got OnX for the state. You can mark locations, you can mark things, but it's an incredible resource because we've got a lot of public land that's not WMA. So for example, right, if you're looking at Cave Run Lake, if you looked at the 2022 forecast, you'll see Cave Run Lake has a tremendous, excellent rating on white bass. Yeah. And a lot of the land around the lake is, I think it's national forest. It's that Red River Gorge. So you've got a lot of public land, but it's not WMA public land. So unless you know what you're looking for, that OnX is really the cleanest way to make sure that you're leveraging public land to access, most of the opportunity that you have. And we're fortunate in that most of the white bass runs we have take place on pretty extensive public land bordered water. Not all of it entirely, but quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. I feel like Josh probably has like notebooks at home of just notes.
I bet.
From 12 years back. So
I was about to say, you've been doing this for, you said 12 years, I think. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, about 12 years now. Yeah.
Do you have just logs and logs of how every year's went?
I have a lot of picture notes, so I'm not as disciplined enough for a log, and sometimes I kick myself because I'll think I remember something and then I don't. So I absolutely kick myself. I take more notes now than I ever did before, but we keep a tremendous amount of photo logs.
Yeah.
I got you.
So a lot of people are asking about locations. I want to save that to the end so we can kind of talk about some different parts around the state. And I know you've referenced the fishing forecast, and that's a great start. But let's talk lure selection. So I know you are a fan of the Popeyes and some different plastics, and I don't know about little crankbaits or not, but I know there's a lot of different things you can use.
Oh yeah,
to catch white bass. So talk about some go-tos. Talk about maybe some things that people wouldn't think about. Where do you start when it comes to lure selection?
It's the number one thing is size. The second would be type. I would say third is probably color. Okay. And you all have a guilty preference. If you ask anybody and you look through the feeds, what would be I'm going to ask you, John, what are the two things that everybody says you use for white bass? Everybody.
You know what? I don't pay a lot of attention to that. I just do what I like. But
did you say color?
Well, no, he just said,
yeah, go ahead. It could be color. Some people throw out color, but there's two very famous items that everybody talks about when someone asks, "What should I use for white bass?"
I'm guessing like is a curly tail grub one of them.
Yep, a white curly tail grub.
Yeah.
The famous rooster tail.
Rooster tail.
Rooster tail. You know what? There's been people saying it in the comments. Rooster tail.
I was gonna say I got a rooster tail.
Josh is a big fan. Josh Jenkins, big fan of rooster tails.
Man, I catch everything on a rooster tail. If I'm going trout fishing, I literally don't tie anything on but a rooster tail. That's it.
Man. So I'm going to segue off of that. I think to be really successful with white bass, not always. You can have one lure and always take that approach, and you can do fine. But there's fine, and then there's killing it. And so I
want to kill it.
So that would be, for me, it's a two-part. You want to search things out because, again, you're chasing a pelagic fish. That fish generally isn't just sitting one place and in one spot. It's moving, and that's even evident if you're working a school. We call it pulsing, and we deal with that with hybrids. They pulse, and there's a rhythm to it, and there's a direction to it, actually. And hybrids do it a lot more than white bass. But when you get those schools, they get a little bit of pressure. They'll move up further into the run, and then after a little bit of time, they'll move back into the run. So you'll have the bite kind of come and go. Mm-hmm. But long story short, they're moving. Even when they're in a pool that's 200 feet long, 300 feet long, sometimes they're not in that full 300 range, and you could stand there and cast and you may not get anything, but you walk up 100 feet and you can get into them. You just have to catch up with the school. So it's fairly common for us to work a couple miles to find out where we can really reliably get into them. But to dial that back, so there's a search, right? You've got to search them out. And then once you find them, you can be more effective with the presentation and other lures than rooster tails, in my own personal experience. Yeah. But rooster tail is a perfect, keep walking that bank and keep casting. And because all you need is one random fish. And generally you can always guarantee one random fish. If you're casting anywhere around them, at least if they haven't been pressured, you're going to get one to bite the lure. And all you need to know is that they're there and around. And then you can really fine tune and tailor from there. If you've got a preference for the rooster tail, you can keep throwing it. But I prefer going to either hard baits or plastics.
My uncle always said when the strapper run, he said, man, you could take a cigarette lighter that's orange, throw it out there and they eat it. He said, so is white bass kind of like that too? Once you're on them, it's like, it almost doesn't matter what you're throwing. They're going to eat it.
I wish you get those opportunities, and you absolutely get those days. I would say you get less of those days than you do get those days. So I think as long as you keep a mindset of that's not always going to work, if you want to maintain at least being consistently effective, yep, you're going to kind of have to adapt a little bit and fine tune and adjust as you go. Not to say now, again, you could keep one lure and you could catch 20 fish and you may be tickled pink. But if you fine tune some things and you try to stay with a school and you really hone in what they're after or what they're exactly feeding on, you can turn a 20 fish into 40 fish. You can turn it into 60 fish. And again, there are days with white bass where they're just so friendly, that you can literally almost scoop them up in a net. But again, you get less of those days and more of where you've got to approach it with some tact, a little bit of finesse.
Yeah. Josh, what's your PB during a day? We're just like, what's your best day ever?
Normally we normally stop counting at 100, and we always get a good number of days where we go past. I mean, we've had hybrid days where we stopped counting hybrids collectively at 125 hybrids.
Wow.
White bass, that's much easier to do, but normally at that point you're done counting and you're really trying to chase the larger fish.
That's awesome.
So single white bass, what's the biggest you've caught? Because you've caught some big ones.
Yeah, I would say we've gotten close to 4 pounds. Gotten reasonably, just absolute studs. And I would say we get the biggest white bass in the fall. The fall run is incredibly special, and it is loaded with mega fish in mega big water, and they're hitting big things. It's truly something unique and special. But the springtime is really unique because of the color. Everything's greening up. If you catch the water just right, they're going to be in skinnier water. So it's a very different fish. But we get bigger ones in the fall.
What does your setup look like, as in rod, reel, line? I've got like 100 rod and reels that I use just for largemouth. That way that, I've got one for each technique that I'm using. That's just, most bass fishermen are like that. I'm sure you already know that, but when you're out in the rivers and everything, are you taking maybe, 2 or 3 rods, or is there like a specific all around setup that you use for kind of everything?
No, we've got the right tool for the job. So we fish everything just from a stripe perspective. I've got ultra light all the way up to 12-foot surf rods. So it's really all about the right tool for the job. So for white bass, I'll keep 2 rods. And I always take 2 just because you can always count on something happening to one of them when you least expect it. And generally you're hiking and covering some ground. So you want to have a backup with you. So with those 2 rods, I keep 2 ultralight setups, and they're nothing really special. One is an ugly stick ultralight, and another one is an Okuma. So nothing special out there. I think one is 50, one is 25. But I've got a Daiwa Regal LT reel on both of them, and it's a phenomenal reel. You get a lot of line on there. They're super light. They look good, and that's just everybody has a personal preference. So there's no end all be all. I personally like that one just because of the amount of line I can get to the weight ratio on that reel. Because normally you're fishing quite a bit. And if you're targeting them, you can generally, those reels hold enough line that by the time you're done retying, you can generally get through the spring run, and actually part of the end of the spring run into the summer off one spool of line, with what you put on there. So they're pretty friendly from that.
Is that just mono line?
Fluorocarbon. But
okay.
a lot of people use mono. I personally prefer fluorocarbon. And so that's a segue, because you're generally pitching super light items. I like pitching a lot of 1/16 ounce. Especially early on when the fish want something smaller before they start sizing up and eating bigger. So I prefer 6-pound line fluorocarbon for that.
Gotcha. Here's what I love about it is you can go and get this stuff at Walmart.
Oh yeah.
Go to Walmart. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have fancy equipment. Daiwa makes a heck of a reel, but you can go and get a Fluger at Walmart and put it on an ugly stick and you're ready to go. Someone mentioned catching them on a rattle trap. And so a question I had, if you're using those hard baits, like crankbaits, are you casting those and burning those back to you? Is there a rhythm that you're using, some kind of cadence that you have? How are you manipulating those hard baits?
I am a fan. So for a hard bait, I prefer probably about 1.5 inches. And the perfect one, I don't have it here to show, and I wish I did, but they make a Rapala X Wrap that is a 1.5 inch. It is a suspending. It doesn't dive any deeper than 3 feet, but it has that hair. Those X Wraps are fantastic because they've got that hair tight on the back end. And for whatever reason, that always increases your hookup ratio. It always does, especially in the spring.
Okay.
So it's got a lot
every Walmart in the area just sold out of those. You said that.
And now they are pricey. So those ones, unfortunately, I think they're about $11 or $12 a piece. Now I use a lot of inexpensive, super cheap white bass gear. There are some things you absolutely get your money out of, and sometimes you want to have that. And if you tie it right to where you're not going to lose it, I think it's $12 for one. And I guarantee you, if you have it, you'll get your $12 out of it and then some, as long as you don't lose.
Go.
That's the key. But normally I'm fishing hard baits in current. I'm not usually fishing those in an open, suspended, slower moving area. It is. Got some motion sensors.
There you go.
But so normally I'll fish hard baits in the current. So the current through the riffles is doing most of the movement. And so I'm just on a very slow and steady retrieve. And it's a lot like fly fishing. You really want to have them on the swing. So if you're kind of lined up with the riffle, letting it come down through there and really kind of making that swing as it comes down through the riffle. And you're just trying to figure out where can you get that most effective swing where those fish are staged.
Yeah.
You can get a smack on every pass.
Now, if you get that $12 lure hung up in the rocks, are you going to get it?
The beautiful thing about white bass is generally you're fishing shallow enough that you have a pretty good chance of getting it back.
Yeah, there you go. I ain't letting a $12 lure go get hung up in the creek and not going to get it. I got to get up to my chest. I will.
We were at the Classic about 3 weeks ago, and there was a guy that gave us some crankbaits to try out, and they were like $38 a piece.
Yeah, we didn't pay for it.
Take it over here, and like the 5th cast got it stuck in a rock, and I was arm deep getting that thing out.
Even though it was free for you, yeah. And that's a premium crankbait right there, man. You can't let that go. That one, I think that would be maybe a little too big for the white bass, just a little. Because I thought about that.
Probably, it's probably hard to tell on here. But
Yeah, it's probably 2.5, almost 3 inches. All right, Mike, you got any more lure questions before we start talking locations?
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of a little bit more along the lines of how you throw them. Like, and it doesn't really matter what lure. Is there an angle that you like to throw at? Is there one that's more effective? Like when you're throwing into the water, do you throw straight out, or are you trying to throw horizontal to that, to where you're pulling it across that current?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Depending on what advantage point you can get, my personal preference, I want to cast fan of the swing. I love a swing because you can cover some ground. So I'm generally, I don't know what it would be, a 15, 30 degree angle, casting it upstream and just kind of bringing it back slowly as letting the current, or even in slack water, just trimming it back that way as it kind of comes through. So I normally not casting straight out. So if you've got some current, I would say I'm casting upriver and I'm bringing it back. If you're in more slack water, you're going to go fan casting. And so I'm going to start to my left and I'm going to cast all the way down the bank and bring it back. I'm going to go, 6 feet out from there. I'm going to cast up there and I'm just going to kind of work my way left to right. Okay. And really just kind of broadcast until I find out either the fish are there and I'm going to get some, or I need to move on.
Okay.
Jimmy Carroll had a good question. Since we're still on the topic of lures, is idea hook size. I know crankbaits and stuff already have your treble hooks and stuff, but hook size wise, what are you using?
That is a great question. I don't know. Yeah, the hook size specifically, I know the jig heads, and that's I know what I'm looking at there. So the 3 size, it's typically weight, and the hook size you get with those weights is going to complement and it's going to work just fine. So that's going to be the 1/16, the 1/8 ounce, and then the 1/32. Those are the 3 you want to have. And I start out with the lighter stuff and generally work my way up as we get into the spawn and we start to get larger fish. And then by the time you get into the post spawn, I'm almost entirely exclusive 1/8 ounce. So I kind of work my way up until we get to the spawn, and then I stay in that 1/8 ounce typically.
Why do you scale up for bigger fish? Is it just because of bigger presentation, or?
Well, so the bait size that I'm fishing typically, so when I'm starting out with those 1/32 and 1/16, I'm starting out with nothing larger than 2 inches typically. If you're fishing over 2 inches, your catch rate astronomically drops. And I mean, like pivot. And the best way to convey that is with a story.
It's a great tip.
We were on a boat. I was throwing 2-inch. My buddy was throwing. He started with 3-inch, and then he went to a 2.5 inch. I'm pulling in fish after fish after fish. He's fishing in the same area, and he may get one fish to every 4 or 5 fish I was pulling in. What really wasn't getting a lot of attention at the 3-inch was getting the same exact attention with a 2.5. And then he finally scaled down to the 2-inch, and it turned into almost every single cast. They really key in on something, and when they do, a 1/2 inch can make a difference. It doesn't always, but it can absolutely make a difference.
Wow. That's a great tip, because someone mentioned using a jerk bait, which is typically that's going to be 4, heck, maybe 5-inch bait. So that's not going to be as not that you can't catch them on that, but you're not going to be as successful.
Yeah, and I'll give you one more story. This actually happened last year. On the back end, we were fishing post spawn, which is actually probably one of my favorites, hands down. And again, that's a whole session on why the post spawn is better than the spawn itself. But we were fishing post spawn. We were fishing probably 1/8 ounce heads. We were fishing 2 and 3-inch plastic baits, which we typically do incredibly well with up through the spawn. And we were getting a white bass here, a white bass there. We were getting enough action. And my buddy, John Carr, was with me.
That's my guy right there, John Carr.
John is the man. Especially
I haven't seen his name on. He should have been watching.
He should have. You'll have to chat.
He's a Harlan County guy, like I am. All right, keep going. Sorry,
but I'm an ultra guy at heart, so I've got a million itty bitty tiny things because that's brought me a lot of success. Well, John happened to have a 1/4 ounce, huge, in my opinion. I mean, a huge rooster tail. I mean, what I would consider a river rooster tail. The thing had some heft to it. It's not your typical, like most of the rooster tails I throw are probably 1/16. So I'm fishing the tiny rooster tails. Yeah. Well, John started landing monster white bass after monster white bass in this riffle, and we've been fishing this riffle for a minute. We knew there were fish in there, but we couldn't hardly get a consistent bite out of it. Well, that day they wanted the green color, and that goes back into color preferences can change from day to day depending on which water you're in. But that 1/4 ounce lure, the sheer size of it just magically happened to match the shad that were in the run. And we don't typically see a lot of white bass feeding on shad. They're feeding on minnows and other things. But every once in a while, and especially post spawn, they start keying in on larger bait, whether they've eaten up a lot of the minnows and the shad are just what's left. But it matched the shad profile magically. And I tied one on too. And I mean, it was fish after fish after fish. That was the difference. We had another guy come down through there, and he hadn't really caught hardly anything and saw us pulling out fish after fish. So he threw everything in his tackle box that he could come up with, and he couldn't hardly get a fish to bite. And so I think he ultimately tied one on too. John may have given him one, and the same thing. He just started fish after fish after fish. And that one was color, but more importantly, size. If you didn't have that larger size, just magically because of what they were feeding on in that run, you just weren't going to catch a lot. You just weren't.
Yeah, the first time I met John Carr, we grew up in the same hometown, and he's a little older than me. But we were both fishing a Finns Lake at Southland Christian Church in Lexington. And he was just walking around pitching a wacky worm, and he landed by far the biggest fish I've ever seen come out of that pond. I mean, you never catch bass. The only thing you catch out of that pond is a trout and a catfish. And he caught like a 4-pound bass out of that thing. And then he started talking, and I was like, man, he's familiar. And then, of course, we hit it off. And he did a kids fishing event with us and last summer. So I'm hoping he'll do that.
I saw that.
Great guy.
Dude is a legend. He's a legend in my book.
Yeah, he's a good athlete too. Good athlete, basketball. He used to go to the blue courts in Harlan. That's like the place everybody went and played pickup basketball. And he's got some legendary tales, John Carr at the blue courts. All the cars, all of them. All right, anyway, let's move on. So we got about 10 minutes left, and everybody wants to know where. All right, they know when to go, they know what to use, and they want to know where. So without giving your secret spots, right, we can look Eastern Kentucky, Central, Northern. We had some Eastern Kentucky people talk about fish trap.
Yep.
Some people in Northern Kentucky saying they don't know where to go. So if you want to start in the east and move west, we can do that. How do you want to do it?
I think we can talk in theory and principle, and then kind of get into details from there, because I think the best thing you can do is teach people how to go look and how to go find. And I call that out because we say it all the time. We say it every single year. There's 100 white bass runs happening that absolutely nobody pitches a single lure into and fishes because nobody knows that they're happening.
You're trying to find those places, right?
Yeah, and we are finding them. Yeah, they exist. They're very real. That's not theory. There's a tremendous amount of white bass all across the state, and there's a lot of ideal conditions for them to run into and spawn that people you have to get out there and explore, and there's really endless opportunity. And I say that because most of your larger lakes have a native white bass population in them. And really what's even more important is our river systems have them as a natural resource. So you've got the Cumberland River, you've got the Kentucky River, you've got the Green River, you've got the Licking River, you've got Green River, you've got Barren River, you've got the Ohio River. Just about any notable river that we really have in the state really has a pretty good, at some point on it, a native population of white bass. And from there, they spread like wildfire. So for example, I'll just take the Ohio. The Ohio has a plus or minus 5 of blue million tributaries that run off and into the Ohio River. And that's both on the Ohio, the Indiana, Kentucky sides. So a lot of those creeks that really you would potentially have to have a boat to get up into, a lot of those have white bass runs in them, and a lot of those go unnoticed. The same exact thing happens on Green River. The same exact thing happens on the Kentucky River. The exact same thing happens on Green River. It's really there's just unlimited potential out there as far as that goes.
So Gordy here is from Ohio, and he early on he was like he wanted to know more. If he comes down to Ohio Riverside, those tributaries that run into Ohio, it's not just a Kentucky thing. He's going to find them too.
Yeah, so the same rules apply. So you've got the Great Miami and the Little Miami can be absolute powerhouses for white bass, especially the Great Miami.
There you go, Gordy.
I've got a buddy that's been pulling out quite a few monster whites out of there over the last few weeks. And again, just using the same standard approach. You chase fish on pre-spawn and you keep chasing them as they move up on spawn and then post spawn.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we have someone mentioned it in here. Snag Creek is one that our buddy Brandon lives. I think it runs through his property, and he's always said the last couple of years since we met him, man, you need to come up here and catch white bass. And it's just a creek that runs off the Ohio, and there's dozens of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's literally a blue million of those.
Yeah.
And most of them, if they have the right gravel structure, and they've got a level of consistent flow and a little bit of water to them, chances are they're going to have a white bass run on them.
Yeah, there you go.
Gordy said he fishes Great Miami all the time. So perfect, man. It's perfect. It's going to be.
Yeah, I've heard that's a good river system. Josh, when you were talking about how you cast and things you look for, I live near Elkhorn Creek. And it's very similar to the way I fish for smallmouth. Just in some of the current and stuff. I don't know if you smallmouth fish. I've seen you hold some. Maybe that's by accident because you were white bass fishing. But do you think that's similar as far as structure? Smallmouth love those gravel shoals. They love water, swift water. They love rock. Is it similar to that?
I think there's a lot of similarities, and I say that because there's a lot of places we catch white bass where I would consider would be prime habitat for white bass, and a lot of people catch a lot of really good smallies in that same area. May not be that exact same time of year, but typically. Right. And I'll give you Elkhorn as a prime example. Elkhorn, you've got endless miles of really good habitat for smallmouth, and you've got a lot of smallmouth in there. And while that habitat for all of those miles of stream would absolutely be good for white bass, there's only a very small section of Elkhorn that really suits white bass that they actually utilize and go into just because they're coming out of the Kentucky River when they go up in there. So that depending on what it is, the smaller the type of water, they can go in and out a little bit quicker. The larger the water, like a Dix River, a Nolan River, you're going to get extended runs, which is why they're so popular. The smaller the water gets, the more of a narrow window you're generally working with and targeting.
Yeah. And that area where Elkhorn feeds into the Kentucky River is excellent smallmouth fish in that area. It's a little harder to access because most people are in kayaks, so or canoes. But that's a great area. Let's kind of do it this way. If you're looking for quantity, right? You just want to go and catch your limit. Don't care about catching a big fish, whatever. Where's some good general spots to look at?
Yeah, I would say quantity-wise, Nolan is probably one of the better options just because it is a tremendous powerhouse for both quantity and size of white bass. And so I say that, some smaller waters, you're working on intermittent streams of fish that are moving upstream. Larger places like that, you can have weeks and weeks of just an endless string of fish that are working their way upriver. So they're a lot more kind. There's generally a lot more access, and there's just a blue million fish to be had when things are happening. And it's not just on one single day. It's not on 2 single days. The type of water and size of water there is much kinder on time.
Gotcha. Now, what if you're just wanting to break your personal best? Where are the biggest white bass?
There's 2 places to find them. You're going to find river bass, river white bass are always going to be larger than typically lake white bass. I don't know why that is, but that is almost always true. There are exceptions, and I will tell you generally the exceptions and we'll make the comments. So like if we're fishing a run, and we did last year, we fished one particular run. So I'll try to do one exploratory new piece of water at least every spring to get on a new to me white bass run. And I try to get on ones that are off the beaten path that typically don't get hardly any traffic at all to continue to test the theories. But we were on one last year and everything on the maps looked like it would be right. And sure enough, we got to the first spot and we were into fish right away. And we started getting into some bigger fish. And I made the comment to the guy I was with, these fish are dang near the size of Ohio River white bass.
Yeah.
And that part of that was, I think that fishery doesn't hardly get fished at all. I think there's virtually zero pressure. So there's a really good opportunity for fish to get a really good mature size to them because nobody's targeting them there. They really get, there's no press about it. So there's just a lot of fish and there's a lot of big fish. So you don't necessarily have to be in a river system to get into big fish. Sometimes it's just finding a run that may be your very own private run or one that people don't know about. And you can really get some quality size fish in those. And I'm speaking from personal experience.
All right. Anything else? I know we had some questions. Go ahead, Josh.
PK was asking about muddy water. When you're fishing muddy water, I assume your lure selection is going to change quite a bit. Are you looking for something, more erratic, more vibrant, more vibration in the water? How are you switching it up when you're dealing with those conditions?
Man, that is a wonderful question. I slow it down. Typically, we see when there's a lot of mud, one of two things happening. Normally, fish either slow down and put on the brakes and they go sit on the bottom, or if we're truly in the spawn, they're moving into the fast water and they'll be in the fastest water they can find. So if I'm in muddy water pre-spawn or post-spawn, where they're not going to be in the fastest water they can get into when it is spawn. So I'll clarify that. I want to fish the bottom, and I want to fish the bottom very slow. And I can tell you that the number one lure that I use is the Gulp Alive minnows. Those things are ultra effective. And you just have to put them on the bottom and you tickle the bottom. And as soon as you find the school, if it's pre-spawn or post-spawn, you're going to pick up fish.
Yeah. Is it because do you think the scent is a big thing with that?
Whoever came up with that scent should win a gold medal because it is lights out. We've been using those for years.
It's good for smallmouth too.
Yeah. When conditions get tough, that's typically one of our go-tos, and we'll use them in good conditions. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But when we just need to go slow and work the bottom effectively, for whatever reason, those outproduce anything else.
What color do you? I always go with the smelt color.
That's exactly. We get the smelt. Yep, a little bit of white because again, white's a killer color. But you get a little bit of that natural too. As long as we get some white in there, that's why we go with the smelt. Personally.
Yeah, that's what I like. So Josh, Jason Maluski, I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Milowski.
So you know
Milowski. Yeah.
Okay. He says, when are you going to get sick of white bass and chase turkeys and hunt morels?
I tell you what, spring is a dangerous thing in Kentucky because there are too many things to be involved with. Ramp hunting, morels, turkeys.
Yeah.
You've got, springtime fishing, you've got crappie, you've got white bass, you've got about any fish that you can chase. There's really too many things that you can do in such a small, limited amount of time that you're either single or you'll wind up single if you try to catch in on too many of those.
Hey, and Josh is a big pheasant hunter, right, Josh?
Run bird dogs.
Bird dogs, there you go. And you know what? I'm going to be disappointed if Hunter Herring isn't on here tonight. A mutual friend. I hope he joined us, but he wasn't in the comments, so I don't know. Well, I'm going to have to reach out to him. So yeah, big bird dogs. You have 2 bird dogs, don't you?
Yep, have 2 bird dogs we run on birds. We try to, again, going back to the public land aspect, we hunt almost entirely public land, and we try to stay on wild birds, and we generally do a pretty good job of it. So it's again, that's another challenge and another piece of wildlife to figure out. But again, just like white bass, putting the basic pieces of the puzzle together, if you can find the right habitat, we generally find the birds.
Hunter said he just got back. Good timing. Yeah, and you
Good
guys don't
save.
know, Josh has been he's provided some excellent pictures for us over the last couple of years, whether it's been white bass or pheasants. I'm like, hey man, that is an awesome picture. Can I borrow it? And he's always said yes, so I appreciate that. He's I think he's a photographer too. I think he could be a wildlife photographer. So, all right, if we don't have any more questions, Josh, I'll put you on the best one. Oh, that must be Isaac. He's either watching from a group or YouTube. That's his Facebook user because it doesn't show up. So it must be from the group. But he said, I'll put you on some Montana trout fishing if you'll put me on some white bass sometime. So that's a long trip though, just to catch some trout, I think.
No, but you do go west for birds. You head to the plains and the mountains for birds.
So
we try to take at least one
right
trip
there
out west to keep adding the bird species.
There you go. All right. Well, Josh, I appreciate you, man. I know you're busy. I know you're probably ready to get out there, and you've probably already been out there, maybe keeping a secret. If you want to keep up with Josh's catches throughout the spring, he always posts in the FLKRC fishing FKLRC Fishing Kentucky Lakes, Rivers, and Creeks, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Facebook group. So join that group and look out for his posts. They're always filled with striped bass with stripes, all striped bass. So, Josh, I appreciate you, man. Have a good night. Hey, if you're still here listening, thanks for tuning in. We have a giveaway. I want you to go to our page, sign up for the giveaway. If you win it, you can keep it. It's an electric knife, a fillet knife. It's an awesome product. I've got 2 of them. If you win it, you can keep it. You can sell it. You can re-gift it. I just need people to sign up, and I'm counting on you guys. So I appreciate you. Josh, thanks. Yep. Mike and other Josh, thanks. We'll be back next Tuesday, probably a turkey hunting show. I've not put it together yet, but that's probably what we'll talk about. Have a good week. Have a good night. Appreciate all of you.
John, Josh, Mike, I appreciate it. It's good talking with you guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Josh.
Guys.
All right. We'll see you guys.